Yeah, could be an issue.
Okay, 8 o'clock, let's call the finance meeting order. All members are present. I want to give motion to adopt the agenda as published and also approve the minutes in the last meeting. Moved by Joel, second by Steve. Discussion, all in favor, aye. Aye. Opposed, hearing none, motion carried. Any public comments? We'll move on to approval of the 2025 dental and health insurance rates.
Okay, right on it.
So in front of everybody, there would be a couple of pages that look like this. That's what we're on.
Okay, great. Good morning, everybody. Reeling after a tough loss last night, but we must move on. Okay, Jam on Golden with the Horton Group, the Brewers, which fall off the turnip truck.
I guess he hasn't started yet.
As it feels close to Kansas, I think, doesn't it? Dan Mongold with the Horton Group. Nice to see you all again this morning. Got a couple of things we'd like to talk through on the health insurance and medical and dental insurance renewals, which I'm sort of happy to report are in a pretty solid and innocuous position, quite frankly. The first page I'm going to start with is this one that's got some color on it. You got a bunch of numbers in front of you. I'm going to try and hit them at a little bit of a high level. On the medical insurance plan back in 2023, we made a pretty big move from Humana, whom the county had been with for a very long time, to a new third-party administrator and sort of a little bit of a new insurance product called Centivo. We made that transition for two reasons. One, it turns out Humana went out of business, so couldn't really be with them anymore. And Centivo also offered some kind of unique solutions to help employers and employer groups and self-funded groups manage their healthcare costs. It hasn't come without some change management and some consternation along the way, but I think we've worked through a good deal of that. All to say, it has had a pretty profound impact on the spend that both the employees and the county have related to their medical insurance plan. What's in front of you here is the stop loss renewal. So being self-funded, the county's on the hook for a lot of the claim expenditures of the workforce, but we do buy some insurance to protect us from shock losses or large claim activity that does happen on occasion. And what you're seeing in front of you here in the green section, I tried to highlight that $766,000 number. That's what the county paid for this reinsurance or stop loss figure in 2024, or that they will pay when 2024 is all through. That middle column of 880,000 is the initial increase that we received from the stop loss carrier, which was about an 8.5% increase, which is about a 15% increase, which is a pretty trend or standard increase from a stop loss insurance perspective. The Horton Group, as your consultants, have a duty and responsibility to you all to go out and sort of shop that stop loss around, seek competitive bids from other reinsurance companies, which we did. And ultimately, we were happy to report that through that competitive bidding process and shopping those competitive bids back to your incumbent reinsurance carrier, we've landed in that far right-hand column of $757,000, or a minus 1.1% increase on your reinsurance, which is good. It's not typical that I get to come into an employer group setting and show them that we're actually going to have a decrease in our stop loss insurance spend year over year. The stop loss insurance is just one component, but a pretty large component of your health insurance spend. For example, it's about $757,000 in 2025 of a sort of a fixed known expense for the county, and the county's budget on the medical insurance side is close to $2.5 million. So it's a meaningful chunk of that insurance spend. So I'm going to recommend that we renew our stop loss contract with Amwins at the negotiated minus 1.1% increase. That's sort of one component of the recommendation today that we that we do take that decrease in stop loss premium. Any questions on that so far? Okay, next I'm going to switch to these pages. Okay, it's kind of a two-part deal. So once we get your stop loss renewal, we factor that into your overall medical renewal for 2025, and that's what all these numbers are on these two pages. This is looking back at 36 months worth of claims from the county. Okay, and we trend those forward. We add some factors into there. We account for the fluctuation in headcount at the county over the last 36 months. Getting towards the bottom of that page, we weight each of these 12-month periods with the most recent 12-month period getting the highest weighting to try and project and predict what the county is going to spend in 2025 on their health insurance, which, you know, if anybody has a crystal ball and can tell me, great. The one thing that we do know you're going to spend is on your fixed stop loss insurance. The rest of your spend, or the majority of the remaining spend, is a function of claims utilization, which fluctuates and ebbs and flow from year to year. So as we use this actuarial sort of mathematical equation and turn to the next page, we annualize all these figures, we add in your stop loss or reinsurance premiums, and we ultimately land in that sort of gray shaded area at the bottom where it says your 2024 per employee per year funding. What we set for your budget for 2024 was $25,618,000 per employee per year as a funding limit. Our projection for 2025, just above that, is $24,202. So what that says or means is we're happy to report that we're projecting that the county's likely to spend even less in 2025 than they did in 2024 on the medical plan. Again, that's a function of a really nice stop loss insurance renewal, as well as Centivo and this model that they have, this primary care driven model that they have, which I think is having some impact on overall spend. And then certainly the county and its employees, whom have been having positive behavior as it relates to healthcare utilization year over year over the last few years. I think all of those things together account for our mathematical equation actually calling for a slight decrease in your health insurance premiums, if you will. We actually call it funding rates when you're self-funded. So we're actually calling for a little bit of a decrease mathematically in the medical funding rates for the county, which is a good thing. Now, in actuality, our recommendation is to pass along a 2% increase to the funding rates. We're calling for about a 5% decrease. Our recommendation is to pass along a 2% increase. Why? Why would we do that? Well, for a couple of reasons. Number one, in my experience and on the consulting side of things, passing along a 5% decrease to only next year ask for some 12 or 15% increase doesn't really serve anybody very well, right? I don't think the employees appreciate that. I don't think it's good for the budget to have these types of ebbs and flows, and you're self-funded. So while we're calling for a 2% increase, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to spend 2% more. That delta between the 5% decrease that the math is calling for and the 2% increase that we're suggesting would also be used to help build up the reserve account for the county, which is sort of the rainy day fund for the medical plan in the event that next year these numbers don't come to fruition. We have a tough year. There's some unexpected shock loss claims that take place, and the budget ends up being a bit misaligned. And so there is a component of this recommended 2% increase that is meant to help build up a more healthy reserve account on behalf of both the county and its employees. So that in the years when I'm coming here and I'm standing in front of you calling for a 10% increase, we can say, well, we have a pretty healthy health insurance fund balance. We don't need to put that full 10% increase on the backs of the employees. We can pull out of this sort of reserve account to some extent. Any questions? talking about. Okay. I'm probably making it a little bit, I'm trying to sort of simplify this a little bit. All told, pretty good situation. Medical and pharmacy trend that I'm seeing in the marketplace is somewhere in the 7 to 10% range. Just with all the research and development and medical inflation, which is outpacing regular inflation by miles. So to be able to come in front of you for really the second year in a row with a rather innocuous medical renewal is yeah, a positive trend, one that I'd like to see continuing, and certainly appreciative of the county being willing to try some different things, the county and its employees being willing to sort of work through some change from Humana, who had been, you know, a real solid carrier to us for a long time, to Centevo, which is a newer player in the marketplace. But I do think it's working. I do think it's having an impact on people's paychecks and payroll deductions, and I think that's a good thing.
What's our reserve fund balance at?
Right now, we're at 18% of annual expenditure. It's about in the 2023, 541,000. So 18% is within the range.
And that's approximately where we want to maintain that balance at?
Well, we've always said between, 2 to 3 months expenditures, but for this fund, the health insurance fund, we're gonna be on the high side. If we combine health and dental, we're actually at 25, which is the high side. But me having a memory, we felt this way in 2018. We were at 540,000, and in 3 quick years, we're down to 84. Because we had 3 years strung together. So this one probably should be a little bit higher. We should probably go back and rethink the fund balance policy, but health insurance and its nature. There's some very detailed calculations here. It's all a guess. So like you said, there's unknowns out there galore. So having a little more in that fund balance is a good thing.
And the guess component, right? I mean, if you had 10,000 employees, a little bit more predictable or credible is the term that we use in our health insurance world. At roughly 120 folks on the plan, it just doesn't take much to go wrong to have a pretty profound impact on your spend. And so I think Paul's right, leaning towards the slightly more conservative side on what we're setting aside from a sort of a reserve position is meaningful. And so this number shows, a 5% decrease would be about $170,000 savings to the self-funded plan. The 2% increase that I'm suggesting is a $60,000 increase. Again, these aren't hard dollars. These are funding rate. These are funding rates that we're putting in place. So the county may or may not spend it. They might spend a lot more. They might spend a lot less. But we do need to set rates so that we can base employee contributions off of those rates. And typically in years past, if we're calling for a 2% increase, we'd pass along a 2% increase to the employees as well, which, nobody ever wants to see those payroll deductions go up, but certainly if folks are talking to friends and families, neighbors, just about everybody's insurance premiums are increasing by somewhere in the 5 to 20% range these days, which is hard to say out loud, but it is the experience that I'm seeing amongst my customers. Any questions on the medical renewal projection for 2025? Okay.
What do you have to do to try to lower this increases? Is there anything or just the way the world's going? You gotta fight the world somehow, but
Right.
I don't, so that's what do you do?
Yeah, that's a good question. Aggressively marketing the components of the insurance that you can, shopping to competitive carriers and reinsurers is definitely a component of this page, what we call the fixed expenses or the fixed fees around the health insurance. The variable expenses, which is the remaining $1.7 million, is employee claim utilization, right? And so we do have some pretty progressive partners in place to help us be good fiduciaries and be good stewards of the health plan. For example, we're working with a pharmacy benefit manager in Navitas that does some pretty creative things to try and mitigate pharmaceutical drug expenses, which are rising at an alarming rate. We also have a couple of products in place, like the family savings plan, which gives working spouses an opportunity to migrate off of Kewaunee County's risk and health plan and instead get on their employer's plan, which is another mechanism meant to try and mitigate costs and risks. We also have some programs in place. It used to be called Direct Path. It's now called Optimize, which is to say if somebody needed an elective surgery, sleep study, joint replacement, something that you have some time to plan for, we've got a solution in place where they could call this third-party service and they would shop those procedures around to the different healthcare systems, different facilities and different doctors to try and find not just the lowest cost, but also the most effective and efficient provider that can offer those services. So we've got these, what we call point solutions in place to really try and put the tools and resources in the hands of the members, the utilizers of the plan, to save themselves money and the county money as best as possible.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
I bring this up every year, but we do not, if a spouse has other insurance, we don't require them to go on that, do we?
We do not require it. We have a voluntary program that they can.
I think that strikes me as being very unusual. I mean, I don't know, what are you finding? Every place I've ever heard of, if a spouse has insurance available, they have to go on that plan.
Yeah, so I don't see a lot of that, and I think it might be semantics, sir, if I may. So I definitely do see employers looking at solutions to help working spouses jump onto their employer's plan. I don't see it forced as much as one might think. So it's the term spousal surcharge versus spousal carve out. Spousal carve out meaning working spouses are disallowed from being on this employer's plan. Carve out. Spousal surcharge or other more gentle sort of voluntary solutions would be if you are a working spouse and you're on our plan, we could either charge them more to be on our plan, effectively trying to disincentivize them to be on the plan, or provide them a solution with a sort of soft landing like what we have in place here in the family savings plan to say, hey, if you've got coverage elsewhere, go take that coverage and we'll make it really, really easy for you. We'll even pay some of your out-of-pocket expenses to go jump onto ABC manufacturers, employers coverage instead of being on the county's coverage. So we've definitely dipped our toe in the water there. Could you go further? The answer is yes, you could go further.
I find that surprising because I can tell you I've had two people that have had to go on my insurance this year. And unions, I mean, their spouses are union members.
Okay,
And they are forced to go, if they have insurance available, which isn't nearly as good as the union plan.
sure.
They're forced to go into it.
Yeah.
And
Well, both employers of each spouse has that policy, then what?
Then they're each on
Their own plan.
Yeah.
own plan.
Yeah.
I mean, and that's what I hear everywhere. And I think this is very unusual where people have another plan available, a spouse would, and we're allowing them to be on ours. And I mean, of course, people are always going to go on the government plan. I mean, our insurance that we offer here is going to be far better than what almost any place.
Most typically. Yes, sir. Yep.
I bring this up every year, but finance committee never has an appetite for it. That's why.
I mean, there's a financial component to it. There's a cultural component to it. Not entirely sure if this is the realm to have those discussions, but yeah, that I talk about it frequently, and yeah, the appetite on the disposal carve out piece in the public sector, especially, meant to be sort of a family employer, people working with the expectation of some family benefits. I'm sort of giving the pros and cons of that discussion.
But you have a spouse that has a high deductible plan available to them. They have the option of going on the county plan. You know where they're going to go.
That's right.
And what is the cost then to them?
Yeah, so that's,
taxpayers.
that's a good point too. The cost to the county. Again, I don't know if this is the appropriate forum, but the cost to the county is minimal in that you'll be charged the fixed expenses to have that person on your self-funded plan, but if they don't have claims, then they might actually be subsidizing the risk pool. If they are a utilizer of healthcare, particularly a higher utilizer of healthcare, then your sort of talking points make a lot of sense, right? So it can kind of rub both ways. You know, a shrinking self-funded risk pool isn't always a good thing, having less bodies in our sort of insurance product. But at the same time, you know, we could pinpoint the claim activity of the folks that we were trying to mitigate off the plan, which isn't always easy, but you see where I'm going with that? Yeah, yes.
One other question, and maybe you covered this in the 10 minutes that I was late. Wellness plans, Supervisor Swagel made the comment about getting costs down. I know that wellness plans, those kinds of things to try to improve overall health, lower, obesity and all of the other things that are major factors
Yep.
in claims.
Yes.
And is that something that?
So while we don't have a formal wellness plan in place at the county, the Centivo insurance product actually, I think, takes a pretty interesting stance on that, where they're really trying to have your care directed through a primary care physician, which might sound like, wouldn't every plan have that? But they don't. And so a lot of folks, the term they use is medically homeless. That they once they're sick, they self-diagnose and self-refer themselves into specialists. This program and this plan says, no, go to the low-cost primary care provider first, whom you should already have a relationship on a yearly physical or whatever it might be, and know your numbers, and start there, because that primary care physician, who's a wonderfully trained doctor, not a specialist per se, but has seen lots and lots of illness and ailments, might very well be able to treat and give you advice on whatever it is that you need, as opposed to going straight to the dermatologist or oncologist or orthopedist, who are far more expensive. So I sort of call this wellness on the cheap, because wellness programs themselves oftentimes have a cost to them, and a workload around them, but oftentimes hard to find a return on investment of those dollars. It's sort of like how
Typically, they claim that wellness programs way more than pay for themselves.
Yeah, well, I think, how do you measure something that didn't happen? Right?
Hard to do.
Yes, and so, did you avoid the heart attack because of the wellness program? Hard to say. I think I've been doing this for 13 years now. The return on investment of the wellness programs when I first started was $7 to every $1 spent on the program. I don't know where it's at now. Last I heard a few years ago, it was 3 to 1. And I think folks have a hard time really making the direct correlation to a return on investment. My stance on wellness programs is it's more about the value that you receive from the investment, meaning showing the employees that we do care about their health and well-being and the overall wellness of them. But I struggle to stand here firmly and suggest that dollars spent towards a wellness program will definitely have an impact on the self-funded medical plan. One large claim, wellness, I hate to say it, but wellness doesn't cure cancer. It's not helping us with liver transplants, and it's not helping with some of these very, very expensive gene therapy medications that are decimating some self-funded plans. It is still good and right. Okay, it's definitely still good and right. So we've got some built in, but haven't probably gone to the lengths that some employers do on the wellness side of things.
I think this question, where is the forum for discussions like this rather than right before we're supposed to approve the rates? Or is this the only time we talk about these features in the medical plan? Why isn't there another time where you could, so we're not pressed against, we have to approve the rates? Because I think the questions we're talking about are valid and there should be a longer discussion.
The finance committee would have to decide that they want to have a conversation at some point during the year and put it on their agenda, I think is the only
Yeah,
possibility.
and historically, if we have decent returns and renewal rates, it doesn't come up. If we would have a 15 or 20 or 30% renewal rate, this would be on the very next agenda and probably special meetings. So to the point, if the finance committee wants some other discussion, we can put that on some other agenda.
I think like to Paul's point, we're sitting here with a reduction and a good fund balance and it's seemingly things are going well. Can you always tweak it and improve it? I would say certainly. And maybe we would look at having an annual meeting to review it in the future, but I mean, I think things look quite healthy, no pun intended.
I'm not arguing with you, but I think you're right. You ought to have so we don't come to this point and then start having these ideas like, why aren't we looking at this? Why isn't that like 2 months earlier?
Well, we don't know what the rates are.
No, I'm
Yeah,
just saying from the
absolutely.
features of the plan, things we could look at, because I think the constant need to, from costs, that's not gonna go away.
Mhm. Yeah. I mean, the Horton Group sends up, monthly reporting to the county on how the plan's running throughout the year, so that, this certainly isn't a surprise to sort of Paul and Jeremy where we sit today. The discussion around, could we have more whiteboard sessions about what else is going on in the universe, what else is possible, not to say we have to do it, but just to educate you all on what's going on out there in the employer-sponsored health insurance land. I'd be more than happy to come up and have those discussions, both broadly and more myopically as it relates to the county and its health plan and its spend and its history. Certainly, summertime, wintertime, you name it.
Well, the schedule as it goes now is, so late July, typically, we get an early estimate from Horton for something to plug into the budget, and this year it was 5%. And then between there and October is when typically the renewal rates are set. So if there's something to discuss, that would be probably the opportune time to do it. We know where we're headed. And again, that's an early estimate with a less than desirable amount of information. Later we go, the better off it gets. But that's a starting point for the whole process. So that will leave August and September meetings to potentially have something with some known information other than just a wide open, well, we don't have a number yet.
I think it'd be useful is when that renewal comes out, the estimate comes out, that we have a discussion about what are the possible tweaks we would entertain and what would be the cost savings potentially from that. But I think those are the questions that are being asked right now.
Right, and to get to where you're going, Doak, I think we might want to actually have that discussion earlier yet, because that could change our reinsurance rates, that could change who is enrolled in the group, that could change everything. And so if what you want to do is explore is the benefit plan that we want, I think that probably has to start even earlier yet, like in the springtime, to see where we want to be. I will say too, that in a competitive recruiting environment like that, you can save costs on the front end and then, harm recruiting and retention staff. So there's a balancing point where the plan design has to be competitive still.
Okay, very good. The other component was on the dental insurance side of things, and happy to report there's, you are self-funded on your dental insurance as well. That plan has been running pretty well, and we are calling for a no change to the rates on the dental insurance front. You spend about $160,000 a year on the dental plan. Versus, like I said, 2.5-ish or so on the medical, but yeah, a positive renewal is projected for the dental plan as well.
Is that on this handout somewhere?
Yes, it's on this overall, we sort of did a full summary on anticipated renewals on the far right-hand side there. Roughly minus 1.5% on the stop loss reinsurance. Overall, on the medical, we're suggesting a 2% increase. 0% on the dental. The voluntary vision program, which is an employee paid product, right now, we just received it, is receiving a 7.3% increase. Still working on negotiating that. Again, that's employee funded and pretty standard in the vision world to start the increase in that space. I think we could do a little bit better there. To give you a sense, I mean, that probably means the single rate is going up 40 cents and the family rate, maybe $1 and some change. Not to be dismissive of the increase, but just want to give you a little sense of what that means from a dollars and cents perspective on payroll deductions. And we are still working on that renewal.
Just from a historical perspective, dental is very stable. Since 2014, we've had 3 increases, a 1%, a 2.5%, and a 5%. The last one is 9.2. That one takes care of itself. It's a stable as a plan would be.
You've only got so many teeth.
No.
And there's only so much of a benefit allowed on the dental plan, right? So it's just a far more stable spend. Medical, on the other hand, very volatile. Although not so much for the county for the last few years. Any other questions?
So basically what we're looking for is the approval of a 2% increase.
Do we need to include the switch to,
No switch, just
or the renewal with,
stop loss.
or is it 2% cover that?
It is baked in, the 2%, it's baked in, so that could work.
And we're not approving the division. I mean, that, you said that's still under negotiation.
It is still under negotiation, and I don't know if we typically, it's employee paid. But it has no impact on county spend. I don't know that we typically vote on that.
Yeah.
So it's just the stop loss and the.
The medical renewal at
Medical.
2% and the dental renewal at 0%.
The stop loss is built into the 2%.
Oh, so you don't have. Well,
No, we don't.
I'd make that motion.
I'll second.
Okay, moved by Doug, seconded by Jeff. To approve a 2% increase in the health and a 0% in the dental. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, hearing none. Motion carried. Just a note on that, maybe next year, July, early August, we can put that on some of our agendas and go through some of it. Whether we'll make any progress on it, we'll see, but anyway, it's worth the effort, I think. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dan.
Thank you.
Next item on the agenda is a request from KCEDC for additional funding. I was kind of shocked to see this on the agenda when there was public comment at the last board meeting, and all of a sudden we're on action item here on the agenda. So, does anybody want to start this discussion off? Because I don't say on it other than what I will say later, but.
I do have a question. Why is this a separate action item and it's also on the proposed changes to the budget?
Because it came up and I wanted to have it in fun. It's not 2 separate decisions. If you decide to vote on it, yes, no, or change dollar amount now, it would take care of this. If you voted later with the rest, it would take care of it. I wanted to have everything in place.
And I would just say too, the accountability for asking to have it on the agenda can rest with me. I was approached about it. I knew it was something that was in the board's consciousness, so I asked Paul to add it to the agenda for today. The board's consideration, the board can certainly act, however, seems appropriate.
Comments on this?
Why are we funding the thought, the theory of ACEDC is great, but why are we funding? This is a mean disrespect, I hope respectful, I hope it's not disrespectful question, but why are we funding them at all?
You're asking me the question. I was on the original committee when this KCEDC was set up, along with Ed Dorner, Bob White, and a number of other people from Luxembourg, various. The pitch to the taxpayer funded or money that was going into it was that if you support us with taxpayer dollars for 5 years, after 5 years, we will be on our own. We will not ask the taxpayers for any more money.
Okay, but
So now 10 to 14 to 15 years later, we're still asking the taxpayer for money. Are there, this is a 501(c) corporation. Why is the taxpayer funding a private organization? If that's the case, then we should have all the 501(c) corporations in the county line up and start asking the county for money. If you use that theory, so. I tried to get this removed from the budget, probably in 2016. And we were gonna do a 20% decrease, and then the next year we were gonna go to 0. I thought we had traction on that, and all of a sudden at a budget meeting, it got changed. So I got no action. I bring this up every year. And I get sick of talking about it. Because I don't believe the taxpayers should be funding private organizations. That's all I'll say about it.
is there anyone else funding them besides the county? Where else do they get their monies from? I don't know if that's right to ask at this meeting either, but I'm asking.
Just to answer that question kind of indirectly, Milt, when this whole discussion came up about decreasing funding, or should we fund it or shouldn't we fund it? We had asked for an annual listing of who their contributors were. And we never got it. And then all of a sudden, we hear that the organization is not going to be supplying minutes, or because they're not subject to the open meeting law. So there we are.
Well, as a major contributor, I would say that we should be privy to whatever information we so deserve. May not be for public record per se, but
Well, as a private organization, they don't have to, it's not a public entity, so they don't have to provide anything.
We have just for the board's information, we have a representative from KCEDC here. We hear from him.
I could probably answer some of the questions. I sat on that board for almost 10 years. Private investors do support. I'm not sure what the ratio is right now. I'm not on that committee anymore. But it's probably over half, well over half of the money. If the county invests 40, I think the private invests well over that. I know they do fundraisers to support it. I do support it. I think it's good for the county. But I do believe that the county should be, I've always asked for at least a quarterly report to the county board, and that hasn't happened this year. It hasn't happened at the town level. Our town does support it. We couldn't get it. That's my answer. So Ben is here if you want questions for him.
I don't have a problem. I do have a problem supporting the 40,000 that we originally give, but I'll resist it because I can't get any support. But I do have a real problem with raising that 60 grand. That's a problem to me. Is that, so is that what we're here for, Paul, on this line item with Jeremy? Is that what we're here to talk about the extra 20 grand they're requesting? And then that's gonna come up under the budget adjustment, or if we talk about it here?
It only needs to come up once, either vote or don't vote or improve, change.
We have a motion to approve, a motion to not approve, and no action, and you move on.
Well, is there, I'm just wondering if there's any other comment from anybody on the rest of, anybody else on the finance committee that wants to talk about this issue? Right, is there a motion out there to support the additional $20,000 in the 25 budget? Sure. Is there? See, no more than the item dies for lack of a motion. Okay, moving on to item 8, Paul, you want to do the financial reports or medical dental and all the things, which is clear to me, but it's,
So we'll start with contingency. I think I said last month that we're none. Well, there clearly was. There have been 2 requests by the highway department now. Both of those are entered. No new ones have come up. I think last month I said there were. Sales tax is the next item. So we have collected through September. So we have 7 payments for sales tax that get the revenue account, and year to date, I'm sorry, the monthly collection was 137,530. Year to date, 954,808, sorry, 898. And we are 40,000 below where we were last year. It's about 4%. So I think a couple months now I've been saying it appears to be plateauing, while it's actually dropping a little bit. So people are buying less, we're collecting less sales tax. And this is the first year since we implemented this in 2017 that it appears that we'll have less in 1 year than the year before.
is this report, Paul, is that through September or through August?
This is the payment we received through September. So we will have all the way through January and February payments coming in that are applying to this year's revenue. Now, our biggest month, which is around Christmas, still has to hit. But the year so far, we've had one month where we've been over what the previous year's month was. So there's enough data here that the trend is we're gonna be. Things can change. They changed quickly before, but it looks like we're gonna have a little less than we did the year before. We still will, most likely, we're headed for 1.63 million. The revised budget is 1.55, so we're still gonna meet budget. It's just not gonna be quite as much as the previous year. Other than that, department wise, nothing new has come up since previous months. We have, still a lot. We'll probably have a budget adjustment from the sheriff because it's a $4+ million budget with staffing issues. We'll rearrange things. He'll be under budget. It's just which lines they're in. We've got one from the health department already down the list here, and I'm guessing that we'll have one from the clerk of courts, because if the jury trials happen as they think they will, they may need either an adjustment or a little bit of contingency depending on how that pans out. I had a dollar amount last month. I think it was in the $15,000 area at most, if everything happens the way we think it will. So that's all that's expected for the 2024 budget. Any questions on that? Health and dental reports were included. I think we had a very good presentation this morning. One thing worth noting on there is August is back down for health. June and July were up a bit, and August is back down, which is part of the reason why you wait until later to calculate that renewal rate. Because if they had done it a month ago, the trend was rising quite sharply, actually. If there's no questions on medical dental overtime report, overtime reports included. I don't have any insight. Just that. Any other questions?
Any questions for Paul on any finance? Report time? Okay. Item 9, it's approval of the 24 budget adjustments for public health grants.
We see this every year, sometimes different grants, but the health department makes their best guess in August, September of 1 year for next year's budget. The state grants always change, sometimes a little bit, sometimes a lot, sometimes several times a year. So we wait until about October, November or so and say, well, here's how they ended up. And she has 1, 2, 3, 5 different grants that have gone up or down a little bit. The biggest one being WIC for some reason went up 30,000. That's a sizable increase. That one's been a little up and down lately. So this is the adjustment to the health department's grants for what the actual awards are going to be as known at this point. And just updating them over a year. So this would need an approval. Actually, it's 37,000. This would have to go to the board. Actually, because it's over 20,000.
So this is an increase of revenue of 37,000?
Increase in revenue, grant revenue, and an increase in those grant expenditures. In total for the 5, it's going to be 37,000. One or two has gone down. But the net effect is an increase. Yeah, 2 have gone down, 3 of them went up. A net effect of increase of 37,000.
And the expenditures track.
Yeah.
It's all built against the grant. So
I assume that we had already expended the dollars, right? We just got more matching dollars. We didn't go out and do this suddenly in the last month. did we? All this month?
She gets some of these updates as the year goes, but rather than having 1 or 2 of these every single month in 12 months, we wait until October. So yes, some of this is already spent. She knew a little ahead of time that WIC wasn't gonna be 70,000, it was gonna be 11,000, so she's in the process of spending it. By the end of the year, or by the end of the grant. Some of these grants don't go calendar year.
So what you're looking for is a motion to approve, to adjust the 2024 budget in the public health department by $37,000.
Right.
$183.
Right.
Any questions on that? Did I get a motion to approve that budget adjustment for 2024? Job second, Joel, to approve the budget adjustment, public health, all in favor? Aye. Opposed, hearing none, motion carried. Thank you. Next item on the agenda is approve 2025 proposed budget adjustments.
Yeah, and an updated list, because we have a few more items that came in between sending stuff last week and yesterday. So this updated list. Most of these are routine. Well, A is, we get a notice of what shared revenue happens like days after we hand out the administrator's proposed budget. This brings the best guess up to the actual amounts. So the state shared revenue that affects the general fund. The new state shared revenue, part of that's also the highway budget. That was the supplemental that started last year. They increased those now from the amount based on a calculation of the amount of sales tax that the state collects. And you know, it's a 14,000 and I think almost $22,000 increase with this. Based again on the increase based on how much the state collects in sales tax and then distributes to the county. So that's an increase about 22,000 spread over a few accounts. The next one that comes in is the highway, roads and bridges. That one comes in very late September, early October. That's based on a formula. So after our audit's done, we send a report to the state. The state pulls out certain dollar amounts, plugs it into a formula, and then calculates how much we get in transportation aid for the next year. All but one of those numbers I can predict. So we make a best guess. There's a percentage they have in there that they just call percentage of their share of costs or something. That one went down this year. I can't predict that one. I don't know why. So our Transportation aids have gone down 33,000, so that adjusts from our best guess to our actual state aids. Item number C, we can skip over because it was just shut down, or didn't happen. Item D. If this was a standalone, you couldn't see it. This one comes in late every year. This one happened to be, our estimate was $2 off the actual one. We can skip it, we can put it in, since I'm putting the rest of them in anyway, this doesn't put that. And then item E, since we did just approve 2% instead of 5% on the health insurance. That's a summary of what the entry would look like, adjusting departments down from 5% to 2%. I will have the detailed list between now and the county board. That was my estimate. So the total here for A, B, D, and E would then be taking the administrator's proposed budget as handed out in September, adding these adjustments to it, and that, assuming no other adjustments, that's what would be presented to the board. Now, there are a couple others out there. The sheriff has a radio grant that we'll discuss in a little bit. If the executive committee makes any other changes to any positions, that could come through yet. And I know that the land conservation department has to change their program. That could be in 24 or 25, depending on how the vendor is going to find that one out. But that one would happen between now and November as well. So this is the list of known numbers. So I would suggest we have a motion and approval of A, B, D, and E. And then we can talk about the radio project.
Any questions on the proposed adjustments? For the board. And I'd entertain a motion to approve the proposed 2025 budget changes as they relate to state shared revenue, utility revenue, highway and bridge aids, additional funding in the, is that the computer exempt aid?
Exempt computer aid.
Exempt computer aids and the health insurance, which we talked about before, had a 2% increase.
I make that motion. We're excluding C, and that's yes.
Moved by Joe, seconded by Steve. To approve the proposed adjustments to the 2025 budget. All in favor? Aye. Opposed, hearing none, motion carried. Thank you, Paul.
One coming up. We don't have all the information yet. Really hoping we'll have it by the 15th. Has to do with a grant for radio replay. I thought it was water.
We don't take one out. Oh. Give me a second here. I'm not on the. Wait a minute. I think you'll turn it on. Thank you. Just. So yeah, well, waiting for Paul, I'll just give you sort of an overview. So this has to do with our radio system. We have been in the current radio system for a little over a decade. And that is the state system, which is known as Wisconsin. So we are one of a handful of entities throughout the state known as daily users. You're gonna see that referenced in the document. Daily users, basically 10 years ago, we decided to partner with the state to collaborate onto the state system versus stand up our own standalone communication system. And so where we're at now, basically almost 10 years later, 12 years later, it is time for the reboot, right? Most of the stuff is becoming end of life, whether it's the subscriber units, our handhelds and mobiles, or the system as a whole. So at the state level, we've been working on this quite intensely for quite a while. And I'm the chair of the Interoperability Council, so I've been knee deep in all this. And a big part is to advocate for those daily use counties to make sure that we do what's right by them. This is a big part of that. So the system is getting revised. The new vendor is L3 Harris. They have a great track history. They do a lot of the work with the military, most of the communication systems there. And they were the successful bidder to build the new system. The big change to it is going from frequencies.
So I don't want to go all techie here, but currently we are in the VHF spectrum or frequency band. They're transitioning to the 800 frequency band. That's important for a couple reasons, is that Brown County, Manitowoc County, and Door County, well, let's back up. Brown County, Manitowoc County have already been 800 for years. Door is rebuilding their system on their own, and they're transitioning to 800. So our now transition with Wisconsin to 800 is going to be great for interoperability regionally. So that's a plus for us. The big lift is that all these portables and mobiles all have to be transitioned from VHF over to 800. So all those radios have to come out and the 800 is put in. That's where the grant comes in, because we're basically kind of changing horses in the race. So our big advocate at the state level is you can't go from one frequency to another and not take care of these daily use communities that have made investments into the state system. And they acknowledge that. So this grant is an 80-20 match. So it's an 80-20 for the replacement of all the subscriber units for these daily use counties. And you'll see in this document, we've been carved out. This grant is only eligible for Kewaunee County, Florence County, and the city of Fond du Lac. Right, it's a $1.4 million grant, 80-20 match. And then we've gotten commitments from L3 Harris and JVC Kenwood that they are discounting the radios that are going to be bought by those daily users to a 60% margin, to reduce 60%. That allows us to get a lot more radios in the hands of a lot more first responders. So that's the crux of it. Where I stand now, I met with the EMS Council last week to make sure all the fire departments, first responders, PDs are all aware of this transition, because it's going to impact them, right? It's going to impact them as far as changing out these radios. Again, only to the 20% match as far as budgetary impacts. And then again, with the 60% reduction of costs. But we do have to act by January 9th. So only one applicant per county. So I have to bundle all these together, all the fire, EMS, everybody under one roof. They only want one applicant. And so I've got to kind of lead this charge. So I've been putting together a full roster of all the radios. I'm getting those rosters scrubbed, because over 10 years, of course, there have been some decreases, some increases. We see most, like our first responder groups have grown a little bit. I want to make sure we get the right amount of radios for the right amount of people. The big thing here is just being able to get, well, there's two parts. There's a resolution that's a component of it. That's going in front of public safety next week, and then ultimately up to the board. That's one of the components. I have certain things I have to check off that I'm doing to be able to submit this by January 9th. But for our purposes today, it's that financial impact. So I don't know, Paul, you want to take any more? You want me to keep going as far as the breakdown?
I can wrap it up at the end.
Okay. So basically, when we look at, and I've got so this is the full roster. Every radio that's on that system, we know, because they all have to be registered on the system. So nobody can just willy-nilly say, I'm going to program in the system and start talking. It has to be registered. So we know how many radios are on the system. So knowing that number, we broke it down by departments. So as a whole, when we look at the entire county, we're sitting at about 224 portables, 145 mobiles, and 31 base stations. So for all the radios total throughout Kewaunee County is about $1.2 million to flip them out. Okay, the grants for 1.4. Mind you, that's split between 3 entities. This is also not going to be the only grant opportunity. There will be fiscal grants coming up in future fiscal years. So we're going to make, I want to take advantage of this first one as much as I can, get as much bang for our buck on this first go around. So that being said, as it relates to the county, our total piece of that is about 543,000 for all of our portables and mobiles. So that's Sheriff's Department, Highway, Emergency Management. Those are the 3 entities countywide that have, are touching the radio system. So it's not the Sheriff's Department, it's everybody. So our total is 543,000. That 20% match would be the 108. So 108,600 is that 20% match that would have this fiscal impact. So that's kind of the numbers we're talking about as far as being able to get it. Project date starts in September. It doesn't end until March of 26. So we've got all of 25 to be able to do all these things and get it ready. So we're going to be, getting our quotes, getting them ordered, getting them in hand. But then we have the system. We're not going to be the first ones going on that system. The state is already starting to build out that system. They're starting up in the northeast corner with Florence County, Marinette County, because they're already touching 800. Michigan State is 800, and they do a lot of interops. So it's going to be an easy lift to be able to move them from VHF to 800 because they're already doing a lot in 800. Then they're moving down to the southeast corner, the Milwaukee metro area. They're going to do what they do down there. So the good news is by the time they get to us, they will have learned a few things, right? And it's going to be an easier transition. 10 years ago, we were on the front side of that. And for anybody that was around 10 years ago, it was a painful transition. And I think Gary was here for that. I think Jeff was part of that. We had a few of that every time you were here. So my message to them was, don't put us on the front of this time. You know, go ahead and do some of your learning in these other communities, then come to us. So we're about probably 2 to 3 years out. So the transition's a ways out, but we want to make sure we have all these pieces in place as far as the equipment to get on the system early. So that's why we're bringing it up here.
Okay.
Anything else?
So the reason it's here today, so about a week after the administrator's proposed budget was handed out, along comes the grant notification, whatever you call it. The time period has this happening in 2025. My first question is, because we have 3 county departments plus umpteen other fire, EMT and police departments, can we collect enough all this information to have it in time for the 2025 budget where it really belongs? And it's got a whole lot more than I thought we would 2 weeks later. So I think between now and October 15th, we'll have enough to put together. But in rough numbers, it sounds like there's about 1.2 million of equipment to be purchased. It's all like the county's portion of that would be 108,000. And then the other locals of police, fire, EMT would have their 20% match, whatever that comes out. So if we can get that list narrowed down, pin down, you know, what our best guess for the price per radio, you already got the number of radios from that list, and then any changes. By the time we get to October 15th, we should have a very good estimate of what the total cost is, what the breakdown is between grant, county match, and the locals for the other agencies match. And if that's the case, this really belongs in the 2025 budget, and we can get it with a very good estimate before the overall budget's adopted. But as of right now, they're just big estimates. It sounds like by the 15th, we'll have a much better number to put together. So that would mean a short meeting before the board meeting to look at this grant in summary, and then vote on it before the meeting, and what we would then, if approved, have it added to that list we just looked at.
So Matt, this is a required upgrade then, or is this a required upgrade to be on Wiscom, or this is required upgrade for us to function, or where are we at?
This would be required for us to be able to function on Wisconsin. So your option could be, you know what, we don't want to, so, because the other part of this, the state is building out the system. They're building out our local system. The first go around, we built out our local system, right? And this time they're saying, no, we don't want anybody else's fingers in this thing. We want to own the entire thing. That's a good thing for us because they're building out the entire thing. And as far as daily use, the expectation, the deliverables, 95% portable coverage at the hip. That's the standard, the industry standard. So they're going to build all that out. But if we want to operate on it, yeah, we got to have the equipment. So they're literally building our radio system. And then they're giving us an 80-20 match grant on 60% reduced equipment to be able to operate on the system. It is a gift.
So they're doing all the infrastructure and the towers and all that
Correct.
build out.
Correct. The only thing that would remain ours is the paging infrastructure. And again, without spending another hour, there's another piece that says, you know, how the pages go out for the fire and first responders. That's still going to remain the same, and we'll patch it in the new system like we do currently into our current system. So not a lot of changes on our part locally, because the state has said we don't want any local fingers in the system, because that's what was happening for the last 10 years. You had local vendors with the subsystem, like, wait, something's broken, let's go in the system. And pretty soon they're changing things at the state level, and the state's like, hey, who's touching our stuff? So in this go around, they said, we're cleaning this up, everybody out, and we're gonna build it, and we're gonna maintain it. That's a huge thing for Kewaunee County.
What does that mean then for the municipalities and townships? I mean, they all have an inventory of how many radios and equipment they need. So are they aware of the expense to them for their budgeting?
So I met with them last week, and they all know what they have, and so I'm just asking them to scrub that list to make it accurate. Most of them are the same. I think our first responders have grown a bit in the last 10 years and added members, so we may have some increased radios there. But again, for the purpose of us, it doesn't impact our match, right? It's just gonna impact that overall grant dollar that I might have to pursue it in subsequent years. But for the purpose of this conversation, it's just the county piece of the highway EM. Is that
Well,
makes sense?
yes and no. We had, because it all comes through us, all this has to be done.
Yes.
So it's gonna come through, but we have to know what that is. The other thing too is this one in the grant document, it specifically says there'll be one reimbursement at the end. So ideally, we time this out where we get the equipment late in the year, and get reimbursed for the county, either late in the year or early next year. we don't want to be floating $1.2 million longer. But this grant in particular says one reimbursement at the end. Other ones, sometimes you could have reimbursements at the end.
Can we apply for the grant without having the full commitment from these other entities? And, you know, what if they say we can't find that money in our budget for this year? Can you apply for the grant without that?
Right.
commitment?
Right, because the grant is being written by the county, so they're looking for a commitment from the county. So yeah, you're right. So let's say the city of Kewaunee for their 20% of that match. If they said we just can't do it, I mean, there really is no option. We have to move forward on it. Otherwise, they won't be operating on the system. We can't stay on having DHF units.
Let me ask it differently. If we go apply for the grant and the city of Kewaunee says we can't do it, are we on the hook for those radios now for their 20%? I guess I'm asking that for Paul as well. I don't know how that would work.
They would approve $1.2 million and we would buy 1.2 million, up to 1.2 million. And if a city said we can't do it, well, then we wouldn't be buying the radios. We wouldn't be getting reimbursed for that. I think it's gonna cost them more later. If there's a grant later, great. If there's not, or maybe it's a 60-40, not an 80-20 grant. It could be later. And again, I don't know when the systems will be up and running, hopefully.
Right, we've got about 2 to 3 years.
They could skip this first grant and we could get our radios at the price.
Correct.
So we could get the full grant and then just spend on
Yeah,
our
and just
radios.
leave them out if they're not comfortable with that 20% and 25 budget. So yeah, like the city, if they say, you know what.
But 80-20 grand, you don't turn your back on it.
Yeah. Now, this is a $1.4 million grant. We already came up with 1.2 million of equipment, and we haven't counted the other two entities that are called Florence and
City Fund.
Fond du Lac.
Right.
So we may not get 1.2 million,
understand.
which means somebody's going to have to wait
Yes.
if they want to.
Question. So the $108,000 match, you're talking about, that's just to cover counties?
Yes.
Equipment?
Yes.
That has nothing to do with city of Lagoda,
Correct.
city of Kewaunee,
Correct.
city of Luxembourg.
Correct. Right. I mean, the first time we did this, the first go around, and again, we were more than gracious. The first go around, we paid for everything. Right? Over a decade ago, we were handing out radios like they're chiclets, right? It was crazy. And this time it's like, no, we got the grant. I've worked my butt off to try to get this in this language. These municipalities are gonna have to at least meet that 20%. You know, we were able to battle for a 60% markdown on these radios, the 80-20 match. You know, that's all I'm asking, is try to come.
Is there, so if we've got 3 jurisdictions that are gonna be going for a total pot of $1.4 million, is there a minimum amount that, you know, if all 3 apply, I'm assuming everybody's gonna apply, they just do it 33% then, or?
They'll probably break it down by needs. Again, Florence County will be minimum because they've already run a lot of their equipment through dual band because they happen to interrupt with Michigan. So they're not gonna be a big pot. City of Fond du Lac, and I don't know how much of this is, there's some working going on there because now the county of Fond du Lac is upgrading their system. And if you can imagine, the city of Fond du Lac was a daily user, but not the county. And I don't know what happened that there was such a disconnect, but there's a chance that the cities in the new revision of the county system say, yeah, we need to be on the county system. If they do that, they're out of the pot. Where there would no longer be considered a daily user, because part of this is this commitment to say, yeah, we are gonna be daily users forward. So if they decide, you know what, the county of Fond du Lac system makes more sense for us because we're all in the same county, then they would have to walk away from this grant opportunity. So we don't know exactly what that pot will shrink or grow.
Cause I guess
Fond du Lac County not this bad for the city.
so what I'm trying to get my head around then is ultimately, if we're gonna be committing as a county to this system, we don't know what we're gonna get for a grant. So how much money are we committing then as this committee to recommend to the board to spend? If it's $1.2 million to redo all our radios, but we don't know how much grant money we may or may not get.
Correct.
Ask for all of it, and if the grant comes back later, we'll adjust it back to what we have, and we'll adjust who gets what.
So it would be a $1.2 million ask.
Yeah.
Right, because then in subsequent years, when that comes out, I'll be doing the same thing again next year. So in the next fiscal year, when DMA comes out with another grant, I'm gonna be right there saying, hey, you know, we're not done yet. So we're gonna continue to go back for these subsequent grants.
And where are we pulling that from? The budget?
The radios the last 10+ years, I would say other fund balance. 30,000. This is, we have fund balance there for longer term assets, that's not recurring.
On the other municipalities, Oklahoma, Kewaunee, Luxembourg. Their 20% match, where does their 80% come from?
Same thing from the state.
Do they have to apply for it?
No, In fact, because if you read the grant, when you get a chance to go through, you'll see only one entity can apply. So I'm applying on behalf of all of these entities.
Right, so we essentially act as the fiscal agent and accumulate their match and send it in when needed, but we need to know that they have a budget and that they want the radios purchased at this time. All we really are committing to, we'll budget for the whole project, but we're committing to the 543 county purchase and the 186 match that we go with that.
So,
the way I understand.
yeah,
it, correct?
we'll buy all the radios. We'll pay our 108,000. We'll collect the other entities portion of it and the grant will pay for the rest. But the sheriff's department is doing all the legwork.
Sheriff, I don't know if you mentioned this, but just in case I didn't catch it or maybe somebody else, when's the kind of anticipated implementation of the system? When would it go live?
So we're looking at potentially 27.
Okay, so it's still a ways off.
Yeah, it's a ways off. This is something, we want to get these radios in hand, even if we have to literally palletize them, right? That they're in here, they're created, they can stay up in our building. We're good, we have them, right? And that way, as they start to say, okay, Kewaunee County, we're getting close, looks like we're gonna be in your area next year. Because we have to start that schedule of how we start swapping these radios out. And that in and of itself is a whole different dance. So yeah, we want to be way ahead of this for planning purposes, because it takes time to start pulling radios in and out. It used to be Motorola's. What's that? Motorola? Well, they could have a choice. So you got anything that's P25, so it's a standard base, so it's not proprietary. So if people want to go and get a Motorola, go ahead. We have not gotten a commitment of any markdown through Motorola. So both L3 Harris and Kenwood, JVC Kenwood said, yeah, we're willing to do the 60%. I've got an interop meeting next week down in Mass and Motorola will be there. I'm waiting to see if they want to come to the table and say, hey, we're gonna offer the same. If so, I would hope they would.
Yeah.
But I don't know that answer.
So if we buy the radios now and the system's not up for till 2027, are we shortening the useful life of the radios by having them sit for 2 years?
Well, it wouldn't be 2 years, because by the time we get them, you said late next year, probably by the time we get them. So 26, they would start installing. Yeah, I mean, within a year and a half that you're gonna have those that they're not in use. But I'd rather that than hold off and all of a sudden not have either the grants or the availability of the equipment with what we've seen as far as deliverables. And now we're on the backside of it. So it's one or the other. You either lean forward, you end up, coming back.
Is there on this proposed resolution, this vote for report? There's no dollar amounts in it. And I'm just wondering if we should be putting something in there that talks about the anticipated potential grant money and the potential county share of that.
Well, it all depends on timing.
Yeah.
If we approve the budget, the outlay in the budget before we bring that to the board, then there will, it's going to be, we'll see it's already done. So I'd rather do that, wait until December for that to hit the board.
It's, sounds like by October 15th, that we can have, we'll have the numbers to plug into the budget, which will be the same numbers that are plugged in there. When you bring that to the board is makes sense. The budget adjustment we should have by October.
So that's where it would be accounted for, the dollar amount going to be raised.
Yes.
Projected match will be out of that.
Fund balance.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So do we need action on that now or we need it?
I think
We
that,
need a meeting on the 15th.
yeah, let's wait until we have actual numbers in front and then take action at that.
Talk about meeting or half hour before the county. Meeting.
Yeah. Is that when it's 6 o'clock?
Over the 15th, it's 6 o'clock.
Okay, so 5:30 October 15th.
Got that? Okay, so then at this point, there's no action required on this issue right now.
And again, it'll be coming through public safety, so we'll be having that discussion next week with our committee and making a recommendation back up again.
But by the 15th, you and Paul will work out,
The numbers.
because you're gonna have some, you'll have some commitment on that.
I'd like to have before our meeting, that would.
Well,
we
yeah,
need that
that'd be
like
great, but 15th is more realistic.
Then we don't have to question, well, did it come through the committee?
Right.
And I did not expect to have this much this early, so that's a very good thing. You get it in the budget now, rather than coming back later, amending the budget a month after we passed it.
So I have asked for a meeting with, gentleman's name is Eric Beal, he's the SWIC, the statewide interoperability coordinator, along with a representative from L3 to come to our county and give sort of a an intro meeting to the county fire departments, EMS, everybody, like, all right, here's what you can anticipate. So when that happens, I'll blast on the invite, probably have it down the highway department where it's big enough, say, all right, here's what we're looking at, timelines, and really try to get everybody synced up early on this one. Because again, it is not lost on me what we went through 10 years ago, and I want to make sure this is a more pleasurable experience.
And there's still a lot of people out there.
Yeah.
Good memory.
Yeah. No,
Happy.
just that there's no guarantee that this new system is going to cure some of the issues that were out there. Fire departments losing signal. or-
Yep, so I mean, that's the optimistic part is this transition from VHF to 800. And again, I don't want to take up any more time, but if anybody ever wants to visit about the differences between 800 and VHF, it's a cleaner frequency, less noise floor, better coordinated. We're gonna have a much better experience in 800 than what we struggle with in the VHF world, but that's, I'm going, knee deep in nerd world. But if anybody does have a question, it's exciting stuff to talk about, but probably not here. But I am excited. I'm excited about the vendor, L3 Harris, and a great track record, as well as the sponsoring agency. When I tell the people, over 10 years ago when this went for the first time, we were under OJA when it started off to Justice Assistance. About midway, as we're starting to build the system, the state dissolved OJA. So it literally took the hosting agency, the parent agency, and dissolved it, and then took the program and sent it in two directions, DOJ and DMA. We were literally like, an island. And so having it under DMA, and they have an amazing structure and support system with Department of Military Affairs that this is now housed under, it's top notch. So I'm much more confident in the governance and the guidance that we're getting as we march through this. As well as the fact that we're not gonna be on the front side. We're gonna let Florence County and that southeast region, learn some of these things that by the time they show up by us, they're like, hey.
Thanks for the work on this.
Yeah, it's been about 10, every 10 years since the last one stood up, it's been meetings for 10 years, so I'm hoping that this county benefits from it.
Any other questions you've had on this proposed project? If not, we'll move on. Thank you, Matt. Any questions on the vendor payments that were? Okay, then I entertain a motion to approve the supplemental payroll as presented. Moved by Joe, second by Steve to approve the supplemental payroll. All in favor? Aye. Opposed, hearing none, motion carried. Any other matters to come before the committee? Paul, do you have anything? Any other committee member, Mr. Chairman? Okay. Chairman?
Nothing for today, thank you.
Okay, our next meeting, that'll be October 15th, half hour before the board meeting. To discuss the grant proposal, and then our next regular meeting will be Friday, November 1st, 8 o'clock. Okay. That I entertain a motion to adjourn. Moved by Jeff, second by Steve to adjourn. All in favor? Aye. Opposed, hearing none. Gary. You're adjourned at